Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Katie Sacra, and I will be your moderator for tonight's webinar, GFPD Care in Action, Empowering Caregivers. As a parent caregiver myself, I am very excited about tonight's webinar and the new resource we will be sharing with all of you. We will be taking time to answer questions at the end, but please go ahead and submit your questions at any time throughout the webinar. You can do this in the box located beneath the webinar player window, or I'll be monitoring the chat box with assistance from Krista Olson, who's one of our panelists this evening. So feel free to use the chat box to submit questions at any time, again, throughout the webinar. And the Q&A button is also an option to submit anonymously if you'd prefer that. So tonight we have an amazing panel with us, but before we get to introductions, let's talk a little bit about who caregivers are. So the term caregiver it's really been around for quite some time, yet it's often misunderstood and it really lacks a good definition. So one way we could define it as a caregiver is a general term referring to anyone who provides care for a person who needs extra help. It's important to note that caregivers don't have to be paid or trained to be a caregiver either. In fact, rare caregiving is often a full-time, unpaid job. It's important to recognize our role as caregivers. We need to know it, and we need to make sure others do too. Without recognizing this, we lack support, but also policy can be impacted when we leave caregivers out of important discussions. We also, support can be improved when we know who the caregivers are. So who are we? Please note that these few stats that I'm sharing on the screen are US stats. These are just a few stats that are reported in a publishing by the National Alliance for Caregiving and AARP. They are widely regarded as one of the most authoritative resources available to describe the American caregiver. And as you can see on the screen, 39% are men and 61% are women. And family caregivers now encompass more than 1 in 5 Americans. And there's a few other stats on here. I won't go into detail, but they kind of talk about the toll. And that's really important to talk about a little bit today because it's going to lead to, why we need to be able to come up with these new resources to help support caregivers. So the previous slide is for caregivers providing care to persons 18 years and older. And only a small percent were providing care for their own child. Now, I don't want to minimize any caregiver role, but I want to acknowledge the caregiver that is a rare caregiver is a different experience. Rare caregivers' emotional stress is about twice as high as that of general caregivers. Additionally, it's also important to note who is caring for individuals with rare diseases. The caregiver role is taken on by the most immediate family members. And if you look on the screen, you'll see 59% are caring for their own child under the age of 18 years old. And this slide, I think, really just explains a big part of the motivation behind the new resource we're going to be sharing tonight. The work that caregivers do puts us at an increased risk for experiencing mental health disorders and emotional strain, including depression, anxiety, and burnout. This great graphic that was created by the GFPD really sums it up well. Parents who are also caregivers of children with disabilities are often described as superheroes, but they are not superhuman. We need help. We need that help because the toll of caregiving can impact our own health and our ability to provide care to our child and/or our loved one. Chronic stress can get inside the body, where it influences our immune, cardiovascular, and hormonal systems to impact our future health. Family caregivers have a 33% higher risk of future illness and disability compared to non-caregivers. So all of these reasons and more are why I am so grateful to have been a part of this amazing team of women who hopefully you're seeing their pictures on the screen, and they helped create this new resource, the help card that we're going to share here tonight. And they're also going to share their own experiences with all of you. For those who do not know me, I'm Katie Sacra, Director of Family Programs here at the GFPD, but most importantly, I am mom and caregiver to TJ. TJ is a 24-year-old living with multiple disabilities, including deafblindness and complex medical issues, all caused by a rare disease, PBD-ZSD. And so I'd like the other panelists to introduce themselves. And next will be Ashley, if you just want to share, who you are and how long you've been a caregiver, who you're a caregiver to.
I'm mother to Archer, and he also has PBD-ZSD. He's 14, so I would say I've been caregiving for 14 years, although in his early life, I didn't quite see myself as a caregiver, but now I understand that I have been caregiving for 14 years.
Thank you so much. And next we have Katie Maynard.
Yes, great. Thank you for having us. I am Katie Maynard, the mom to a PBD warrior that has died in 2020. And his name is Judson Maverick Maynard, and he lived 10 months. And so I would say those whole 10 months, I was the primary caregiver for him. Then I also think of other roles of caregiving for parents and grandparents within the home.
Thanks so much for being here. We also have Maggie French.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Maggie. I'm based out of Northern Ontario, Canada, the sole Canadian here. I am caregiver, proud mama bear to Miss G. She is 9 and a little bit, but I would say I have been a caregiver since probably she was about 18 months old when we started to notice that things are slightly off with her, but not quite sure why. And she also has PBD-ZSD. And most recently, I did play a caregiving role to my father, who was terminally ill with cancer. So I bring the lens of caregiving in a rural capacity as well as caregiving for an older parent.
Thanks so much for being here and sharing all of your experiences. And we also have Krista Olson, who's here with us. And if you could share a little bit about who you are, your role or relationship to caregivers, and how long you've supported caregivers.
I'm Crystal Olson. I'm in South Carolina and I work for the Deafblind Project here. I'm a teacher of the visually impaired, so I've been doing that for about 17 years and supporting families. I've been, like I said, with the Deafblind Project for about 10 years now, and I would say I got pretty involved with the GFPD and other organizations about 8 years ago, and I get to do some family support calls for the last 7 years. And so I've definitely learned a lot about the toll of caregiving and how complex that can be. So I'm just happy to be here to be a resource.
Thanks so much. And I know Ashley already touched on it lightly, even just sharing, I didn't think of myself as a caregiver. And I know for me, I really didn't identify as a caregiver for a very long time. So I'm glad that we're able to do this tonight and share with everyone who may also be going, oh, wait, I'm a caregiver too. Any of you want to share with me about when you first realized you were a parent, but you were also a caregiver too? Ashley, I know you touched on it. Did you want to share a little bit more?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of related to the chronic stress that I experience and that like as time has progressed and this disease has processed, and he's lost vision and hearing and the ability to walk, and the responsibilities have increased over time. So I just started to realize that, the stress was directly related to the increased responsibilities and that we weren't just parenting anymore. It was daily living. It was toileting. It is toileting. It's teeth brushing. It's dressing. It's bathing. It's all these things that, he can't do on his own. And that's when I realized it's parenting and, it's caregiving and it's all this together. But it was, like you said, I didn't realize it at first because he was young and he was able to do more and he was developing, and, we didn't really comprehend the nature of his disease. But as he's gotten older, it has really occurred to us that this is why we're so stressed out. This is why we're exhausted. This is why, we're anxious. It's because of the role of being a caregiver.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. I too I don't think I really saw myself as a caregiver until I participated in research that the GFPD actually supported that we did. And there's a publication about the emotional toll on, rare caregivers. And that participating in that really kind of opened my eyes up for the first time to go, okay, wow. And then later on, even with the COVID shutdown, the pandemic, really when we needed caregivers to have access to vaccines even, and they all of a sudden didn't have a good definition of what a caregiver was. Those are things that really stuck out to me that helped me really realize how important it was that we recognize this role. Katie or Maggie, did you have anything that you wanted to share on when you realized you were a caregiver as well, a parent caregiver?
I would say, just listening to Ashley, I think it realized for us, it was the paperwork. So when you're a parent, you can go to the walk-in clinic or emerge and take care of an issue and then go home and then your child gets better. But when your local providers are like, we think you need to go out of town and see someone else, and here's the paperwork you need to take with you to do that appointment, it started to realize, wait a minute, this is outside of normal parenting. And now we've traversed into caregiving. And then it's also, like Ashley said, all the other things like toileting and feeding and, bathing and clothing and all the rest of it. And things like, okay, yes, when G was a baby, I had to do those things. But as she got older, I'm like, I'm still having to do this. This doesn't feel like normal parenting. So I think that's for me. I think, yeah, like my child has binders of medical stuff. Like that was the big trigger for me, I would say.
I was just going to agree with Maggie. Is my kind of thought was when I was teaching others, including medical professionals, about the disease, as well as like knowing a schedule, having to stick to that schedule, and I couldn't pass that on to someone else. Even at times, my husband, I wasn't comfortable because that was my role. Those were the things that we had to do. So I was kind of in control of all that. It was kind of like, I have all the knowledge and the power to be able to do these things, but it's also very overwhelming. And my husband always said he was the Reader Digest version and I was the encyclopedia. And it was like, because we had those responsibilities and we knew all of those idiosyncrasies with our children and all of those things that were going on, it became those stress that you carried that with you. And it was more than just being a mom.
Yes, I think that all of you are kind of hitting back to that. We talk about that typical child experience, that typical development. We hear those words a lot, and we don't talk about what the typical parenting experience is. And Krista, I think you want to jump in there. Go for it.
Yeah, just coming from a different perspective, I think even in the world of like the professional world, when I go into a home now, which is not something that I did as just a typical TBI before, or even on these family support calls, hearing what the day looks like, or even going in for early intervention and seeing somebody's face when I say like, oh, we can try this or whatever, it just was a complete mindset change for me. After years of helping and supporting families, it was like, I don't need to add another thing to the plate because this is a full-time job. Like this isn't, I get to work and come home and hang out with my kid. It's, I've got to do all the therapies and I have to run to here and it's really been a shift for me in the way that I practice as well. And I know this is geared towards families, but if this does appeal to other professionals, I think it's important for us to remember that it's not just you get your kid home and you get to chill out and relax and do all the normal things. There's so much more to it. And I think that's why this was so appealing for me to be a part of, because I really feel strongly about making sure we don't add extra onto families when we can help it. So
I couldn't agree more. And you actually, have taught me a lot as a professional in realizing that sometimes when those recommendations are made, they're recommendations and we don't need to take it all on. And that's hard. What also is hard is asking for help. And so first, I want to just thank all of you again for being here as panelists, but also as creators of this new resource. I know a lot of time and effort went into this. Our next slide is actually going to show this is a new resource that we created. And this is a two-sided document, and this is the front side. And, it's really hard asking for help. And so this front side is a way that you can ask others for help. It's also a way for, caregivers or people who are supporting caregivers to really realize how they can help you and support you. But I wanted to just, check in and talk a little bit about how hard it is to ask for help. And could any of you share with us, why is it so hard, do you think? Was it hard for you?
That is a great question. For myself and my husband, Miss G is our first child. So in a lot of ways, we were very much unprepared for just like parenting, in the sense that like I'm the youngest. I had never babysat. I had no exposure to what typical development was. And same with my husband. So we have our child and she seems pretty normal, but slightly off. And you're like, okay. And so I eventually kind of had to like get over this fear of asking questions like, is that normal? And then sometimes they say, yeah, that is kind of normal. And it's not. And then once we got G's diagnosis of having PBD-ZSD, I was like, well, now I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what the milestones are. I don't know when anything is supposed to happen. Even even if she didn't have this, I would still be kind of worried about that. So I really had to like get over that fear and say, okay, I am her parent first and foremost. I need to be able to do everything I can to support her. So that means I had to, put my own fear aside and say, okay, just ask the question and say, is this normal? And a lot of my child's parents' friends have said, actually, yeah, like that's totally typical normal behavior for a 9-year-old to do. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's cool. But it did take a long time to get over that own internalized fear that I had.
I think that's such a great point. Thank you. Because we talked about that, okay, I started to recognize I was a caregiver when this wasn't a typical parenting experience, but how do we recognize that if, the child that we're taking care of that has led to us recognizing we're a caregiver is our first child. So thank you for sharing that. And Ashley or Katie, Krista, did you have anything that you wanted to add to the difficulty in asking for help?
Sure. If I wear my professional and personal hat, I think it's just that pride and values. Like if I value that I'm a hard worker and at times it becomes stubborn, then I don't want to ask for help, because then people are no longer going to look at me. I might be looked at weaker or unable to care for, or unable to get this task completed if I ask for help. And so I think for some, and even for myself, is I didn't want to seem like I was unable to do it, or I was not a hard worker, or that we couldn't meet what we needed to do. And another asking for help, even financial, it was, very hard at times to overcome those. And so, but for me, it all goes back to like what I value. And it felt like I was devaluing myself by asking for help, or devaluing our situation because we couldn't do it ourselves.
And I'm grateful that you're here to share both your professional and your personal, because I know that's so intertwined and there's so much great advice there and experience. So thank you.
Katie, I was going to add in that for me, it's a couple things, but I'm always very afraid to like impose on people. And there's that aspect that I don't want to infringe on someone. And so there's that hidden like anxiety that I'm going to ask, and it's going to be an inconvenience to someone because everyone's going about their lives and they may not realize that you have this need, and then you have to kind of interject and share that with them, and that can be intimidating. And then the other part I was going to say is I think it comes down to kind of the personality of me and my spouse, and that having been a military wife for 20 years, like we just really were our own unit when he was home. But when he wasn't home, it was just me. And so I was so used to just doing everything on my own, like I was just surviving. So it just really never occurred to me a lot to like ask people for help. I was just in like, okay, dad's gone, mom's got to manage this.
Thank you so much. That's why I love that there's a panel here and there were so many people involved in creating this and sharing about this, because we all do have different experiences and it is hard asking for help. And I hope that this new resource, and as we talk about things tonight, will help others recognize that, validate that, they're not the only ones, and that there's hopefully some good tips tonight that will help them with this resource be able to improve how they ask for help or how others can support them. So I just wanted to take a moment to look at the front of this beautiful card and share a little bit about how this was created. So ways to help, we have a block here for contact information where you can write in, because depending on what check marks you may be checking off and saying, hey, these are the ways that you can help me, you may need to share your address if you need deliveries made, or your email so that they can send different, gift card links and things like that. They want to be able to text with you and check in. So just being able to, whatever you're comfortable with and what may, apply to what you're checking off, we put a few different lines there. We also broke it out, as you can see, with help. We have a home section, an encouraged area, learn, and provide. And if you look right there in the first section, home, you're going to see that paperwork that Maggie was talking about. So help with inside chores such as laundry, dishes, monthly supply orders, putting groceries away. We really tried to think of a lot of different areas. I don't know if anyone on the panel wants to jump in and share some of the ones that they really, speak to them, or just really highlight any of them that you're happy to see on here that you think will be so useful. I think they're all going to be useful in different ways. The other thing I do love before any of you jump in, I wanted to share that there is a way to customize this. We intentionally left a block there for you to be able to write in something that may, at that time really be a way that somebody can help you. And we recognize that those needs are going to change. So having that area that you can customize it was really important to have on there.
This is Krista. I'm just thinking about the card. One of the things that I really love about it is it's not necessarily honed in on just the person you're giving care for. So, a lot of the times when I work with families, one of the biggest issues that they run into is they don't get the respite because some people don't know how to handle the medical equipment or the complexity, or they feel really intimidated. And I think that's definitely a barrier for asking for help. And while I think we include some of that, like getting to know that medical component or some of those, the communication needs, this also looks at like, how can I help you as the caregiver? Like, I love the, like, join me to get movement in, or, watch something with me, or hang out, or help me organize something, things that are not necessarily like, I need to know how to work equipment or feel intimidated by. These are things that I know how to do that I can absolutely provide in your home.
I was just going to speak very personally. As I mentioned before, I was also caregiving for my father, who just recently passed, but this past fall, the ways to be able to help my two siblings is there was two very specific things I said I was willing to do. I said, I am more than happy to have food delivered to the hospital, to medical appointments, to you guys at home. Like literally just text me your order and I'll have it sent there. And I made sure I had several different food delivery apps on my phone. I had those addresses of the hospital pre-programmed in there and like other places. So I was more than happy to do that. Like it was like, yep, I got you there. And the other thing I had told my sisters is, I said, like, I cannot, and this might apply more so for those of you who might, with your warrior being at their end stage, is I said, I can't be at the hospital for that vigil with my dad, but I'm more than happy to do all the behind the scenes things. So like I was the one who contacted the funeral home to like get the ball rolling on that, to figure out how things had to do. I contacted the cemetery to ensure that we still had access to our plot, like all of that behind the scene things I was able to do. And I didn't mind doing that because I'm like, I am helping, I'm contributing. And I knew it would be too hard for my sisters. But this was my way to ensure that when my dad when we got to that stage and we had to do those things, we weren't scrambling. Like I had a 6-page document outlining all the steps that we had to do and who my contacts were and whatnot. So that's how I contributed. I know it might sound a little morbid, but for my family, it was the best way I was able to help them.
Thank you for sharing. And I think that people, may not realize how significant that is to even just be able to help feed those who need it. That's right at the top here in the home section is Feed Me. And that can be prepared meals, like you just shared, gift cards, delivery, meal prep. So even just coming over, visiting, and being able to get things prepped or dropping off all of that ready to go, whether it's I just need to put this in the microwave or the oven and heat it, or if you have everything ready for me to cook, because even that prep work, we just, we may enjoy cooking. That could be part of self-care for some people. Maybe not me, but maybe for someone that's self-care, but they don't have the time to even do that prep work. So just a lot of great ideas on here of ways that you can be supported. I wanted to also ask all of you if you could share ways that you think this card will help you or benefit others.
For me, like, I tend to get, well, especially early on in Archer's life, one way that like I could have really used help was with care for my typical developing children. And so like that's kind of what always came to mind. But like when I look at these, I'm like, that's awesome. Like that's such a good idea. Even after being a caregiver for 14 years, like I think that caregivers can look at these and kind of realize the different ways that they can receive help.
Mm-hmm. Agree. And even just this document itself, this resource is reflecting just how full a caregiver's plate is, because these are all the ways that you can help, and then think of all the things that aren't listed on here as well.
Katie, I was going to mention, there's a real thing called like decision fatigue. And so I'm tired of making decisions. And whether it's, do I do medicine now or in an hour? Do I do this? What's first in my day? Do I pay attention to my non-affected children? What do I do? We make so many decisions in a day that when somebody's like, I can help, how can I help? our brain goes blank, and we don't know how to answer that question right when you've got somebody there willing to get their hands dirty, if you will, and willing to help. And you're like, oh, I don't know, everything's fine. And so we kind of shut that door. So this card, even just home, if we were to focus on home, that gives specific tasks that we don't have to think about, that, while everybody may not have a lawn to take care of, everybody's got a chore. Somebody's got a dish or a piece of laundry that needs to be washed. And as long as we're willing, and I think that's a big thing to consider, as long as we're willing to invite that person in, it is very helpful. So this just lays those things out, so I don't have to make that decision. And even as a bereaved parent, these things are, during certain times of the year, may be very helpful for me to ask for help, because I know, September through October, November is a difficult time for me. So having somebody and say, these are ways you can help me, even if I just focus on home, or if we look at encourage, is very helpful.
I'm so appreciative that you shared that, because you're right. Decision fatigue is very real. You can't see me, but I am nodding along right now. I think that is something that this card will be very valuable in helping with. It's exhausting to even think about another decision. There is power in just knowing what you're doing, and that just one more decision can really make or break a day for some of us. I want to shift over, and before we move on to the back side of this card, and just talk really quickly about something Krista touched on, and that's barriers. So what are some of the barriers you and other caregivers face in receiving help?
Fear of being told no, or just fear of being exposed. That again, I go back to the our ethics and our values and morals. We want to be viewed as somebody that works hard, possibly, and so just that fear of that status, people telling no, they're going to think that you're less than because you're asking for help, potentially, the judgment from others. I know in other conversations I've had with other people, like, they just don't ask for help because they don't want to be judged, or they don't want to deal with other people's opinions. And so because we set those own personal barriers up, we are unable to reach out to those other people.
So recognizing that some of these barriers are not just external factors, but they're absolutely internal factors too. Thank you.
Maybe I'll add to that. Just going back to my years as a military spouse, we were kind of always starting over every few years. So having to reestablish a support system was a challenge. And, I'm sure that can be for even, other experiences, as far as, if a family is rural, or like us, we didn't have the extended family close by. There's a lot of ways where the physical aspect of having that support system itself is a barrier. And then the other thing I was going to mention is, sometimes the programs that can provide assistance or help, and specifically for us, it was respite. Sometimes just accessing those programs is a barrier itself, and it's often more stress than the benefit of receiving that help. So for us, that was a barrier.
It's so sad and so true. So thank you for sharing that, because the lack of services, even when they may be offered, the barriers in place to even get to them is really significant. I know that when we talked a little bit about barriers as we were developing this card, and Krista, I think it was you who had talked about, knowing that, recognizing this card isn't going to remedy some of these very real and challenging barriers. But we hope that they will at least help you navigate some of them. And Ashley, speaking to what you were just talking about too, with the challenge of people not being geographically nearby. I think that's a great segue into the back of this card, which has two different pieces to it, two different elements. And the left side of the back of the card is exactly for that situation. So it is love from afar, ways to help when loved ones are not physically nearby. And so again, this is really made to be customizable to you. And there's an area that you can even fill in. So even if you're somebody listening in that supports caregivers, maybe you want to write something in and say, do you want to check this off? Here, I have a new idea. So it's not even just up to the caregiver to say, this is the way that you can help me, but somebody else could also recommend some other options. So have any one of you been able to receive support from from afar? And if so, how did that look? What did that look like? Did any of these, come into play? And can you share about that?
Just speaking, it's again from like from my father's perspective is, but we sent him cards. Like it was like we put out a blast to all of our family and friends that said, can you send him happy news, so that he would constantly have something every day to read. And it wasn't just for him, it was also for my stepmom as well, so that, as a caregiver herself, when she came home, she wasn't dealing with a pile of paperwork. She also got like something bright and sunny in the mail to look at, which is a good thing to have. It's that few minutes of knowing that, hey, there's someone out there who's really thinking about me and wanting to know how I'm doing, and that really helped our family for sure. So the send a card thing is like honestly one of the easiest things someone can do to support a family for sure.
This is Katie. I think about our experience with Judson, and he was alive also during COVID. So everyone was loving from afar. And so but it was, so a lot of the things we experienced were exactly what's on here, whether it was dropping off a meal or sending one of the, meals that you just kind of prep and put together. So you don't have to go to the store, going to the store, just people about doing that, or doing the Walmart delivery, and they paid for it 3 hours away and it shows up. We did the coffee dates in the evening with beverages sometimes, and that was just nice to be with other people and not have to have those conversations of how's your kid, what's going on with them, and just having that time and space. But I also do love sending a card or a warm text, and just planning, having just somebody reaching out to you and knowing that they're there, even if you don't always have to reach back.
Thank you so much. And, I think also just that text, and knowing that we may be really delayed, and I mean by a few days, even when I say delay, not just a few hours, but just knowing that you're thinking of us and checking in with us and being okay with us not responding is a really big one too. And so I'm going to go over and show another great element of this new resource, and that is helpful tips when supporting loved ones. And I know that we could probably, make this several pages long. So we tried to pick out some of the ones that were important to us and we thought would be important to others who are receiving support as a caregiver. And I'm curious to know from our panel if any of you, have any of these that really just speak to you, that stick out, that you would like to highlight.
Yes, it's Maggie here. It's the big one in the middle of the page about don't shush kids or dissuade them from asking questions. Instead, answer them honestly and simply, and help them use the right words if they choose words in their question that might be hurtful or offensive. And it's okay to say, I don't know too. So for context, Miss G and I walk to school every day. I'm like, she's perfectly capable of walking. She can walk to school. It's good for her. So she's quite the figure in the neighborhood, to put it mildly. So people will often come up and ask questions, like she has a cane. She has like a snow disc. I live in Northern Ontario. We get snow for 6 months out of the year. So it helps with walking in the snow. And they'll ask questions if if they see us there. And at first, when we first got her diagnosis, it was very hard to answer those questions. And then eventually I'm like, you know what? Whatever, get over it. They're asking questions. Let's just answer them. So like her hearing aids, you say, yeah, she has super ears, so this helps her to hear. And, the cane helps her with walking and stuff like that. And a lot of times, like kids or even the adults in the neighborhood is like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. Or they might comment, say, well, her cane's really cool. I thought it could only be, the typical blind person cane being white and red, and hers is like bright purple with pink stickers on it, right? Like you can have these different types of things. So yeah, I absolutely fully support that one. If kids have any questions, I'll answer them, and and as truthfully as I can. And kids appreciate that, I think, as well.
That one for sure, Maggie, happens to us all the time, particularly with younger children. And like I echo all that, I just really, I don't get offended. I just talk to them and explain things, and these are hearing aids, or these are cochlear implants, or explain why his teeth are yellow. I get like all the questions. So just matter of fact, and I think that in doing that, they become like less the other, less different, more human. So like I really love it when people engage and have honest questions. But the one I was going to highlight other than that was the first, which is please understand that I'm often living in crisis mode. And, even for, um, 14 years, whatever, like I like to say my baseline is, burnout is my baseline. So like, we may kind of look like everything's normal and we've got it together, but underneath that like stress level, that layer is just very thin. So it doesn't take a lot for, to get overwhelming. So I would just say, if you know a caregiver, just understand that that stress level is going to be heightened, like, pretty much, at least it is for us. And, we're just doing the best we can, but we look like we're functioning well, but it is still there.
I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that goes back to that slide earlier on, even this evening, on that caregiver burnout. We do not have to be burned out to not be mentally well. And so, that living in crisis mode is very real. And sometimes it's really hard to recognize that's even happening.
This is Krista. I echo all of those sentiments. I think the don't shush kids one is a big one for me. And just in my role in general, the educating others component really speaks to me, because I even for years have been doing like rare disease day with my daughter's daycare, and I get them completely involved and I send in books. But the other one that I think really, really does speak to me is that when I'm sharing, ask me if I need help or if you just need a sounding board, that kind of thing. And I think it extends just beyond that. I am a fixer, so I always want to offer. So I do ask that question, but my love language is humor. So I'll often ask people, do you want to talk about this? Like, are you talked out about this? And would you just want me to send you completely inappropriate memes today? And sometimes that's the answer, is I just need a laugh. I need to not be surrounded by this. And so I think that component is really just a nice reminder that we don't need to be the fixers. We just need to be the listeners and the what do you need todayers sometimes.
Yes, couldn't agree more. And the keep inviting me, I think that goes along with it's a great one at the bottom, even because of all of these things at the top. We see this crisis mode and not being included, it hurts. And so just inviting us, even though we may say no or not now, but I need to know I'm still included. If I decline, not taking it personally, and just recognizing that we may be living in crisis mode and you may not know all of the things that are happening, but we really want to be somewhere usually, and we can't. So when we're saying no, please don't take it personally. And lastly, before I move on, I wanted to talk about, there's some great practical ways, I think, to share this card and use this card. What are some of the non-traditional ways that we can share this card?
Hi, it's Maggie here. The Christmas card insert, if you're looking for inspiration about what to write in your Christmas letter, if you send that out. I keep telling and teasing the ladies, and like, I'm very tempted to do this. I may not include it in every single card, but I know that there are some people in my network who would appreciate getting this, especially if I customize and say, like, from this person, I would love it if you did this for me. I don't think they'd be offended. They're like, awesome. We know how to support Maggie and her family. Great. And I can see them putting it on their fridge as a reminder. So that would be my tip, is put it in your Christmas card or your holiday card.
And I love that suggestion because it really reaches a wide variety. You're hitting that love from afar even, and speaking to just this broad audience of people who will be able to help you. Hopefully be able to help you. So I'm going to switch over. We can continue to have this conversation, but I think it really speaks to looking at all the different support systems and getting out of the box and not just being traditional in a way of sharing it with, somebody that's really close to you. And like Maggie just shared, putting it in a holiday card and really getting it out there to other people, because sometimes we don't even realize that there are people outside of that immediate small circle that can help us. So looking out broader than that to your friends, family, your community. And I think somebody actually made the recommendations of taking it to an IEP. Did you guys have any other thoughts about this? I think it's so important to help everyone know that this card can have some pretty big reach. And there's probably a lot of people out there that if they knew how to help you, would be willing to help you. So I hope that this helps. But did you guys have any others that you wanted to make specific recommendations, like the holiday card or an IEP or?
what I wrote in my notes when we talked about this, I thought like your 504, your IEP, your school team, birth to 3, if your kiddo is getting those early intervention, because so many of those people want to be helpful, not just come in, meet with your child for 30 minutes or an hour. They want to be able to extend that next step. Even your medical providers, nurses, I live in Appalachian, so everybody wants to be very helpful. And so they ask those questions. So just having them, and then any community organizations that you're involved in. But even if you have family that's involved in, and they're asking how can their organization get involved, that just those churches, clubs, different groups you may be a part of, it really can just keep going a lot bigger than, oh, I have 3 friends and I'm going to share it with them in my card. It may be in a family blast email, or if you're able to work and you're working with your employers, I think that could be another unique way of sharing with your coworkers of how they can help, because we don't always look at our coworkers as somebody that wants to help, because that's our 9 to 5, and this potentially is our evening responsibilities. And so just kind of expanding that and thinking out of the box of who's willing to help, because a lot of people want to help, they just don't have that invitation in or that door in to really know how to help.
Just coming from like a more global perspective, I can see myself printing these out and having them at tables for conferences that I go to, because I don't think it's a GFPD resource, but I don't think it's specific to just GFPD families. I think there are a lot of people that would benefit from this. And I think we talk about the barriers of the family asking for help. And I think there are some barriers to people offering help too, because they don't know what to offer or what they have available. And I love that what Maggie said, like, I told my sisters what I could do. I think there's a little bit of value in somebody taking this card from one of my tables and going, well, I haven't thought about that. I will just check this thing off and say, like, this is what I can do. Is this something that would be helpful to you? And again, it's taking that decision fatigue away as well. But I think this has got a huge reach in terms of the people that it will benefit.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm so glad that you brought that up. And I hope that professionals will share this with other communities. It's absolutely a GFPD resource that can really help a lot of people. Maggie shared herself, even how she's kind of what I call that sandwich caregiver, of where you're caring for a parent and you're also caring for your child. And so this really has the potential to help a lot of people. So thank you for making sure that everyone is thinking of all the different ways that this can support caregivers and how you can support a caregiver. So before we move over to questions, though, I do want to ask if any of you had anything else that I forgot to address. If you had anything burning that we didn't talk about, I want you guys on the panel to be able to share that, while I go ahead and let the audience know that we are going to move into some live Q&A. So we do have a few additional resources that we're going to share about in addition to this new one tonight, but I want to go ahead and just do some questions from the audience, and we have that Q&A button option that you can submit anonymously if you'd prefer. Krista and I are also monitoring the chat box, so you can use the chat box to put any questions, concerns, just comments, anything in the chat box. And then also on the screen is a QR code. So if you take your phone and you aim that right at that QR code, you should be able to get right to this new GFPD resource, which can also be accessed on the GFPD website. So I'm just going to give it a moment to see if what questions we have coming in through the Q&A box. But please, Maggie, Ashley, Krista, Katie, if you have anything that we have forgotten that you just want to add in about this card and creating it, how it can be used, please go ahead and share.
Katie, the other thing that came to me is that perhaps maybe you like to entertain a lot and you have people in your home. I've often thought about like just leaving it on my fridge and kind of being like an icebreaker. And so like, people we tend to snoop. We like to see what people have on their fridges and like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then it'd be a way to start that conversation. So I do think I might actually do that as well and just leave it on my fridge. And as people come into our home and see what they have to say about it.
And I think too, you just saying that, starting that conversation is so important. And Katie, I think it was you who mentioned when we were making this card, there was such great discussion, everyone, when we were making this card. But you were the one who I think was talking about how it really helps you have difficult conversations.
Yeah, so I think it's just breaking down that barrier of, again, I think with the decision fatigue, how do I ask for help? This just lays out kind of an outline. And what I was kind of thinking of the what else, it does help break the ice of those difficult conversations. Either way, if you're somebody that wants to help a rare disease caregiver or a caregiver, or if you're somebody that is a caregiver asking for help, it's a tool to communicate, and we're always looking for a tool to or a vehicle to have that conversation. And so that's what this does help do. That it's something we can use now. And Katie has shared that we're looking at expanding and making it work for all of the populations that we work with as caregivers, including bereaved, which is something that was really important to me. But a lot of these things are still applicable, even though my warrior is not alive today. I still need help. I still need people to support me through difficult, challenging times. And so just again, having this to have those difficult conversations is important. And the other thing I kind of made a note is personalize. And so and I'm going to use our panelists, while I'm going to call Krista when I need a good laugh, and so I know that, right? I know she's my friend that can pick me up when I'm going to have a good laugh. Ashley is my friend that I'm going to call when I have questions about farming and plants. And so knowing that I have friends that not everybody's going to be everything to me all the time, because we can't do that. That's not realistic. But that I have people, my husband and I always joke that we're the people that get called when you want furniture moved, not when you need money, right? And so that, I have, it is what it is. So I have friends that might be able to bring dinner. I have friends that probably wouldn't want to bring me dinner. I have friends that, are very good at lawn care, so they could help do that. I have friends that are really encouraging and just upbeat and, will always make you smile and laugh. And so knowing who to ask for what kind of help, just kind of do that evaluation, can also be really helpful. So you're not asking the wrong person for the wrong kind of sport and then kind of getting hurt when maybe they don't answer that call.
And we do have one question. I'm thinking that the way it's been framed, that it's from a grandparent of maybe the child. And so they're asking about how they can use this card to support their son or daughter-in-law. Do they just fill it out and hand it to them, was kind of the way it was framed. So do you guys have any advice for someone who, maybe if you think about your parent wanting to support you, since a lot of us are caregivers, what advice would you give to this person and how they can help them? Would you want somebody to just fill this out and hand it to you?
Yeah, I would say if they, said, "Hey, I found this resource, would you want to look at it and, check which ones could be helpful? Or do you want me to just decide, choose one and try it?" So I guess you could give them the option, like Katie talked about. They may not want to make more choices, make more decisions. So I would kind of approach it that way and put the ball in their court, and then go from there.
Thank you.
The other sort of big piece of advice I would suggest, and this is again just in conversations I had with my dad, is he kept constantly saying, "Oh, you and Nathan are doing amazing work. Your child is so lucky to have you as parents. You're so supportive." And I'm like, stop saying that. I feel like you're putting me on a pedestal. Don't it. I think he was trying to show love to me, but it was very uncomfortable because I'm like, I don't need that. I would like it if you came to my house and helped. That would be great. But yeah, so if you might feel like your son and daughter-in-law are doing a great job, and maybe they need to hear it, but just tone it down a little bit. They need the help. They don't need to be told that they're, as the earlier in the slide said, we're not superheroes, right?
Yes, I was thinking of that slide where you were actually sharing and thinking, I literally just envisioned it and thought that's really great advice, because we do need to be encouraged, but there's that line of making us feel like maybe we can't ask for help because somehow we're giving this illusion that we've got it, we're doing it all on our own. And I think this next question actually might tie in a little bit to Katie, you were saying, know your friends and, which ones may be able to help, but that's a really direct request. And so how would someone who is more shy and struggles to ask for help? We talked about that earlier, actually tonight, about it's so hard to ask for help. So if you're somebody who is really shy and you're struggling with asking for help, how do you feel like you could use this card? How could you present this? I know the indirect way right away. I'm thinking of Maggie's advice. A little bit more indirect would be to put it in a card.
Put it on your fridge and invite your friends over for coffee and see if they notice it. Like that might work. No, I would say maybe think of your friend group or your circle of care and who is the most open-minded and easygoing person to approach. And, the one that if you feel like you're struggling to ask for that help, they're not going to belittle you or make you feel uncomfortable. They're there to, they're open-minded. I would try starting with them first because I think that might get the ball rolling. You're like, oh, okay, that wasn't so hard. I was able to ask for help. Okay, and see how that goes and then move on to other people within your circle of care.
I'm even thinking about how you could use this webinar. You could use the GFPD and say, hey, this organization just put this out and I received it. What do you think about this? And kind of just starting that conversation. And do you think I should do this? Like, what do you think? And asking them. And that's a kind of a very indirect way of engaging them in that conversation. That would be maybe my suggestion.
Yes, and Katie, I will echo that. As a therapist, I'll tell my patients, let me be your scapegoat. Like, blame it on me. Katie said I needed to ask this question or try this. What do you think about it? And then get their feedback and how they're, take the temperature on that, on how they may respond, because then you'll be able to figure out maybe this is a person I can go to for help or explore this. Or even I like Maggie's, the indirect way of just putting it on a coffee table, putting it on your refrigerator, just so people begin to see it as a topic of conversation, like as it just generate that conversation. They've sent me this tool. I don't really know how to use it. What are your thoughts? Or it's there and if somebody picks it up and they're like, hey, this is really helpful. I didn't know I could. I get this a lot. I didn't know I could still ask about your son. I didn't know I could say his name, right? And so like putting that out there just on literature, on a paper, on your table, or in your Christmas card, just getting it out there can be really helpful to generate those conversations. And you don't have to be necessarily one initiating it.
Thank you. And we have one more question before I move on. And I was going to address a little bit of this, but I'm going to go ahead and answer it as well. And that is this available in digital format for email or text? And yes, it is. So making sure everyone knows that this is available. If you go to that QR code, it should take you to a PDF even that you can download. But I do want to just quickly, before I address that a little bit too, there are some other amazing resources. We hope that this new resource is going to be beneficial to everyone in our community, to other caregivers. But we want to just make sure that there are some other amazing resources too. So addressing equity and caregiving for rare and or serious illnesses. There's a few listed here. Respite, the National Alliance for Caregiving. That's where, along with AARP, they published some of those reports where the statistics were shared earlier this evening. Another one that I have a QR code for. And if you go to the GFPD YouTube channel, you can even watch a presentation from the 2022 conference from two of the authors of this, Caregivers of Children with Rare and or Serious Illnesses. It's a care guidebook and it's amazing. I recommend it for anyone who's supporting caregivers. So again, this is a resource just like we created where it's for caregivers, but it's also there to help people who support caregivers. And then lastly, just, thank you. The QR codes to access this resource is on the screen again right now. If the GFPD can help you, if you are a GFPD family and you're unable to print this, you can't access it to print it, you don't have access to a printer, whatever that may be, just reach out to me, please, at katie@thegfpd.org, or you can just go to our website and hit any of the contact us buttons. It's going to get you to our team members. And we're going to make sure that we can assist you in accessing this resource and any others that you may need. Katie, Ashley, Krista, and Maggie, thank you again for taking the time to share your lived experiences and for creating this amazing card with me for our community and beyond. To our audience, thank you for participating. We ask that you take a moment to complete a survey after this webinar that we will be sending out. But again, if you can't access this and print it, we want to support you in that. GFPD families reach out to us. And yes, to answer that question again, it is available digitally so that you can download it and email it out, put it in a family, email blast or to your friends. You can also download it, print it, and be able to put it in your cards as Maggie suggested. So again, thank you everyone for being here, and I hope you have a great night.